Hello, Professor Elias. Nice to meet you, and nice to host you here in at Ștefan cel Mare University from Suceava. You're welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
We just have like 2 or 3 minutes a break because we switch the things, and meanwhile we could just test your presentation. You can use share screen option.
Okay, let me do that.
Okay.
Right.
Florin, e Florin pe aici? Poți să rog pe cineva, te duci la calculatorul ăla, să închizi zoom-ul acesta, s-a închis deja, deci pe calculatorul ăla ca să meargă sala. Și deschizi, este în bară, în downloads, o să găsești un PDF cu zoom-uri și să găsești link-ul de la întâlnirea de asta.
Can you see it?
Yes, yes, we could see very well.
Okay.
Yes, it's very well. It's very well.
Okay, so then I will stop and put it back on when you tell me.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you.
Good.
All of them are important topics which could be found in Professor Maurice Elias' contribution to the wide world science and practice. His work is focused recently on the areas of implementation and sustainability of interventions and cutting-edge issues such as the link of social and emotional character development and academics, and the distinguished features of sustainable versus well-implemented, empirically supported innovation. He has a very rich publishing work, over 140 books and articles mentioned in the prestigious scientific database, are translated in many languages and inspire and educate people all over the world. At this conference edition, the ENSEC community, wishing to award the Lifetime Achievement for entire activity and for his important contribution to the knowledge and practice of social emotional learning in the service for better life of people all over the world. Professor Elias, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen. And I just want to say how deeply appreciative I am of this recognition. I am acutely aware that I am not a European yet. From the very first start of ENSEC, I have felt included, welcomed, and appreciated. And I have learned so much from my ENSEC colleagues and from my ability to attend previous and, of course, hopefully future meetings. So this award is particularly meaningful to me, and I'm honored to be able to share some of the lessons learned that I hope will guide us moving forward during these clearly very, very difficult times. So I want to talk about using SEL to navigate crisis and navigating SEL during crisis. It is not coincidental that my lab used to be called the Rutgers Social Emotional Learning Lab, and we changed to Social Emotional and Character Development Lab. I want to explain a little bit about that because it's important. In summary, I'm going to talk about how social emotional learning and character development speak to us about how to address students and educators' emotional needs during these extraordinarily difficult times of crisis. Whether war, pandemic, political dysfunction, these lessons are going to be important for us moving forward. More than ever, schools need to prepare students for constructive contributions to their classrooms, their schools, their communities, for collaborative and caring conversation, and for genuine historical and current events analysis and discourse. You know, these are things that we must do because we are today creating our future society in the same way that in the past we created the society we have today. And so looking at it, I don't think we should feel like we've done such a fantastic job that we shouldn't be willing to look at new and different things in order to improve our future. And so that's how I'd like to proceed. I'd like to share with you the way I believe we will get into a better future. And I'm optimistic. I believe that the sun is rising for social, emotional, and character development. I believe that's SEL 2.0. That is where our success is going to come from. And what I mean by that is represented by this image of a sailboat. So it is clear that what propels a boat forward is the sail capturing the winds, or sometimes the boat has propeller, and that moves us all forward. But the question is, where are we going? And that is determined by our virtues. Our virtues and characters set our direction. But what is our ultimate destination? That is our positive purpose. And so we feel now that it is so critical to address the issue of not only skills, but also helping instill in our students a sense of positive purpose, and to understand the kinds of character attributes they're going to need to get to that purpose. Now, the climate of the school is important. Are the seas going to be rough? Are there going to be tremendous waves? Is there going to be a lot of pollution in the water? Are we going to have a difficult time navigating? Well, all those things are what the school climate is about. The journey can be smooth. The journey can be made impossible. Even the strongest boat cannot withstand the most difficult conditions. So social, emotional, and character development help us to reach our positive purpose. And we have to organize our schools to enable all of our students to achieve the journey. And I think we are laboring, and this is happening a lot in the United States right now. I don't know if it's happening as much in other countries. But there's a challenge to SEL in the schools because of a fundamental misunderstanding. The SEL is basic to humanity. It's a universal catalyst. It's not something we discovered. It's something we invented. It is a naming of our essential human characteristics that allow us to navigate in a social world. Without SEL, the things that we value can't happen. So when people say, oh, we can't have SEL in the schools, that makes as much sense to me as saying, oh, you know what? I'm not a big fan of oxygen. Maybe we shouldn't have oxygen in the air. That's not going to work out too well. Neither will it work out too well to not have SEL in our schools. And yet we have to understand that in 2022 and beyond, we are going to have continued emotional and political challenges. And so we have to recognize the climate in which SEL work is going to be embedded. Heightened emotion, greater stress, feelings of loss and anxiety, strained relationships, taxed creativity, a lot of polarization, which reduces listening, and a real awareness of all the disparities that we have in our many countries. And COVID-related concerns are not going to disappear just because COVID becomes less of a public health issue. There's going to be continued impact on many children and families. And Europe is at the borderline of the unthinkable and the unimaginable. And children know this. In the United States, there were decades when kids could not watch or listen to the news or look at a newspaper. Some of you may remember newspapers, print newspapers. They couldn't look at any of those things without being reminded of war. And so as we understand that COVID has prompted many contemplations of change in how work happens and how democracy functions. And so the question is, where does SEL fit in? And the answer is, we add it in, not on. And I'll show you the various ways in which we can do this. We have to recognize that our schools are trying to do so much that just adding more to the jumbled schoolhouse is not going to be helpful. No matter how important it is, we want to add something on, it's not going to work. So the key, as we do in our work and in the Social Emotional Character Development Lab, is to be more integrative, be more synergistic, and first and foremost to recognize that academics and the multiple literacies our kids need for the future, science literacy, artistic literacy, civic literacy, all of that rests on a foundation of service and character. Every child comes into a school wanting to do good. They come to the school because they want to learn how to be a contributor to the world around them. It may not seem that way for some kids, but even the most miserable kid, now speaking as a clinical psychologist also, the most miserable kid wants to contribute. And if we don't recognize that, if we don't recognize that that's the engine that drives learning, then we are going to continue to miseducate our children. And if this was true before, it is especially true in times of volatility, uncertainty, chaos, and adversity. Our kids need grounding. And of course, we know that social and emotional competencies are important. I'm sure this has been discussed at the conference, the so-called Castle 5. But in order to bring this into schools in a systematic way right now, it requires a very solid 3-year planning window that many schools don't have. But yet, when you look at these skills, and you'll have time to look at the recording, I hope, and absorb more of the detail. I just want to give an overview now. But as you look at these skills, it's clear that education cannot function without them, that workplaces cannot function without them, government cannot function without them, families cannot function without them. We have to be able to take others' perspectives. We have to be able to learn how to establish and achieve goals. We have to be able to persevere and overcome obstacles, to work in groups, to recognize our feelings and have compassion for other people, and to be good problem solvers. These are all important, but these are all abilities that are built into us as human beings. So now our key is to learn how to activate them. And there are 7 ways that I want to share with you, and we'll share with you in brief with resources so that you can follow up, that help us bring SEL in and not on. 1, create a supportive, positive school and classroom culture and climate, and to listen to what SEL is saying to us. Number 2, build positive purpose. Number 3, encourage morning classroom conversations so that children relearn how to speak to each other truly. Promote student voice. Build competencies in civil discourse, engagement, and democratic participation in school and community. We will not sustain our democracies by talking about democracy, but by teaching our kids how to live democracy. We have to connect SEL to visual and performing arts because that, for so many kids, is the way into their soul. And finally, build staff capacity for SEL instruction and leadership. This is a collective worldwide concern. It's not happening sufficiently in our teacher education and administrator preparation programs. So we have devised some alternative ways that I will be sharing with you. So let's talk first about climate. It starts with the moment the kids walk into the school building. A positive character building school and classroom climate opens the door to academic learning. Why? Because we cannot separate intellectual, emotional, and social facets of learning. Kids do not come into school and put their emotions in the locker and go about the rest of the school day as intellectual geniuses. This is not what happens. You know this, especially if you've got preschoolers or middle schoolers, you know that emotion triumphs over cognition. And if we don't recognize that, then we're not going to open the door to learning. So yes, once we set the right climate, once we set a climate of acceptance and caring and support and nurturance, then kids are open to learning. And we have to teach them the SEL skills, yes. And we have to recognize that the future requires new habits of mind and patterns of thinking. Our kids have to be more curious. They have to explain their reasoning. They have to not only get feedback, but give feedback. They not only have to answer questions, they have to ask good questions And they've got to be fantastic problem solvers and communicators. Every teacher should be asking these questions. How do I establish a comfortable learning environment in my classroom? How do I prepare my students to practice and apply new skills and information? How do I manage discipline? And what are the 3 or 4 values that I want my class to operate by and that I want my students to internalize? It doesn't happen by magic. It happens through intentionality, being systematic. And so we have to be clear in ourselves, as colleagues, in our schools, and with our kids. Where are we going? And SEL is speaking to us. And this is something I want to emphasize that has become so clear, that SEL is speaking to all of us down a hierarchy, that kids are looking to us to meet these needs, but teachers are looking to their teacher leaders. Teacher leaders are looking to their principals. Principals are looking to their school administrators. Administrators are looking to the district authorities and regional, provincial authorities. And all of them are looking to the ministries and departments of education to provide what's needed. And so here's what SEL is telling us is needed. We need to be seen and heard. We need to be reassured and have optimistic future-mindedness. We cannot thrive in a context of pessimism. We need to contribute to our classrooms, schools, and communities. We need to receive and give caring, kindness, help, and appreciation. This is not a time for tough love. Further, we need to be understood with empathy and compassion, to realize that we are in trauma, beset by strong emotions and worries. Again, this is true for our kids. It is true for our staff. It is true for our administrators. It's true for parents. Understanding this and acting as if it were true will advance education and mental health tremendously. We need to have things repeated to us patiently and caringly, even though we should have heard it before. I'm going to say that again. No, I'm not going to say it again. I'm just kidding. But the serious point here is that under conditions of crisis, we don't listen as well. And therefore, we are going to need to have things repeated. And so we can't be impatient when we said something and we know we said it to somebody, but they didn't seem to hear it, because there's a lot of other emotional baggage being carried. And even though we think our words are the most important thing anybody could possibly hear, that's not necessarily true to the recipient. So please be gracious in repeating what you've said before, because people will need to hear it again. And finally, we need our schools to be places of sharing, mutual helping, and support, building the climate of comfort, safety, and respect in which the journey toward positive purpose can be navigated successfully, especially during crisis. So the theory of social and emotional and character development is based on an understanding that there are many problematic behaviors, but they have the same underlying difficulties. And in the same way, various areas of human thriving, arts, civic, family life, workplace, academics, is undergirded by the same set of SEL competencies. And that the best learning occurs through supportive and caring relationships that makes learning challenging, meaningful, and inspiring. And so we have to understand that it's not just the facts that we need for kids to get. We need them to get deep understanding. William Damon has pointed out that, skills are not enough. And he talks about noble purpose. We refer to this as positive purpose, but noble purpose, a stable and generalized intention to accomplish something that is at once meaningful to the self and a positive consequence to the world beyond the self. Viktor Frankl and others talk about this, but what Damon wants us to understand is that it's not all about us. And in fact, our well-being is connected to our ability to do for others. Now think about what this means for education. Can we see ourselves as igniters of our students' sense of purpose and their purpose for being positive in character, contribution, compassion, and citizenship. That we, igniting this in kids, will create a different society in the future. Indeed, we recognize that all children, and especially adolescents, are engaged in a search for purpose. And this is what happens in their lives. They author their identity through their deeds. They have big questions about their purpose, about their gifts, about to whom and what they should be connected, about their fears, the suffering they see around them, and their own personal spirit. These are things that will drive our students to learn if we address them and give them forums for exploring in our schools. The American writer and humorist Mark Twain has a wonderful quote that I love. He said, "The two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you know why." So how do we go about achieving positive purpose? First, we want to link our kids to the common good. And one of the ways to do that is through journaling. So at different points during the year, at the beginning of the year, midway, end of the year, help kids understand that the world depends on me, that the world depends on me to make it better. And so ask children to set 3 goals. What are 3 ways I'm going to make myself better? 3 ways I make my classroom or group better? 3 ways I make my school or program better? 3 ways I can make the wider community and the world better. Kids need to understand that they are connected to the well-being of their classroom, school, community, and world. And so by starting the process of journaling, we then give our kids reasons to excel. They come to understand, I'm important here. I matter. What I do makes a difference and can make a difference. And so school needs to help me learn how to channel my energies, reach my goals to make myself, classroom, and environment around me. You know, I worked at a school that had as its core values, it called itself the learning place, where dreams are born, caring is shown, and leaders are made. And so rather than make those sort of empty words, what they did was they took each of those words, dreams, caring, and leadership, and operationalized them through all the subject area. And so they talked about dreams and all the implications of dreams, aspirations, goals, possibilities, etc., in reading, performing arts, math, science, school routines, social studies, written expression. It gave the kids a sense that their dreams can become the future. They did the same with caring. How is caring shown? In language and written expression? Where do we see it in history, current events, visual and performing arts, even math and science? And in our school routines, the way our school is organized. Are we showing caring in the lunchroom? Are we showing caring in dismissal? And finally, leadership. Do we believe every kid has leadership potential? If so, can we give kids leadership opportunities? Can we help them see the role of leadership all around them? And that whether it's social studies, visual performing arts, science, or math, leadership is essential to the idea of progress. And so then we also want to understand that mental health needs to be re-understood. So as we think about our kids, as we think about our general education or special education kids, what is the source of their mental health? Well, it's meaning and purpose. It's service and generosity. It's cultivating a sense of gratitude and learning how to reflect for improvement, not reflect for self-criticism, but reflect for improvement. And then to build the participatory competencies, the social, emotional, and character skills that we need to find and achieve our purposes. You see, the idea that our kids will heal better by helping others than by just focusing on themselves is one of the insights that from our better understanding of SEL. And indeed, it is so important that we begin to think about how do we position ourselves relative to the common good? United or untied? The difference is where we choose to put the eye. And we want our kids to be putting the eye in united. So let's talk about the third area, which is about conversations. Just think for a moment, and you could put it in the chat box, those of you who are watching on Zoom, or those of you who are live may jot it down. Think about the best conversations that you've had. What's made them genuine? Did you feel heard and understood? I assume so. Why? Did you want to talk to that person or group of people again soon? Probably so. What about conversations that were non-genuine or unsatisfying? What was different about them? If we draw upon our own experiences in conversation, we will how crucial this act of conversation is to everything that we do. So we began to focus on what we call morning classroom conversations. And the approach that we've taken is multi-layered. It's designed to be metacognitive, to promote executive functioning by helping kids converse about skills, virtues, life themes in a developmental progression. Now, how can you do this? It would seem like every minute of the day should be devoted to conversation, but it's not like that. And so we find that with 5 or 10 minutes per day of prompted, intentional conversation, we can really build kids' conversation skills. And so we do that also with conversations that have a developmental progression. First of all, conversations about making me a better person. Second, conversations that help me think about how to make my school better. And third, how I can take social action to make a positive change in the world. See, these directed conversations, taking 5 minutes a day in a homeroom or advisory, can make an extraordinary difference. Let me give you a quick example of some of the prompts that we've used. If you look at week 4, have a conversation. Have kids have a conversation about this. Have you ever made a change that improved your life? What did you do and why did it change you? And think about the next one. If someone followed you around the school for 30 days, what are 3 words they would use to describe you? What if they followed you outside of school? Which words would be more true about you? Now we're getting at character, right? But this is something I've done in professional development with adults, with teachers, administrators. It's a really compelling exercise to think about. What would somebody say if they followed me around? What am I showing by my actions? And let's have a conversation about this. Let's sort of drop our pretenses and begin to engage genuinely with one another. So a brief conversation about these things every day, multiple weeks across the school year, across multiple school years, creates a tremendous upswing in conversational skills and competencies. And that really is so essential for a future of civil discourse. The next area I want to talk about is student voice. We talk about it, and yet we sometimes don't give it the full measure of attention it needs to have, not only for Tier 1, for our general education kids, but our kids who are identified as having difficulty. Sometimes we are too quick to fix and not enough emphasis on inspiring our kids and giving them more opportunity. And so here are some of the things we can do more of. Have meaningful participatory student government. Don't just have an elected student council or officers. Make sure that every class and group has a representative to that student government. Make sure that kids are involved with the same committees that staff is. There should be kids involved in anti-bullying, in anti-drug, in anti-gang, in anti-anxiety, in dealing with school cheating. Kids have a lot to say about these topics. They don't like these things any more than the adults do. Give them a voice. Have more opportunities for kids to be buddies, mentors, and tutors across age and ability. Let students study patterns of what's going on in the school. Let the school be an object of research. Give the kids supervised graffiti walls where they can express their concerns, their aspirations, their hopes, etc. Have open forum for school problem solving. I work with a school principal in a middle school who every marking period would get his grade level, all his sixth graders, then all his seventh graders, all his eighth graders. He asked them this question: what can you do to make this school a better place? And how can we, myself and my staff, help? And the first time he asked this question, the first marking period to sixth graders, first-time kids, they looked at him like he had three heads. What are you talking about? But he keeps asking this question, and the kids come to believe that he really wants the answers. He wants to hear from us. And all of a sudden, you get wide participation on the part of the kids. Their voice is heard. And as many opportunities for feedback and reflection as we can give the kids, the better. Look, in this electronic age, we get surveys about everything. We have a phone call, we get a survey about how it went. We need kids to be able to feel like they can give us feedback about the unit that they just studied, about the procedures in the classroom, about the procedures in the school. We don't have to listen to everything they say, but we certainly would benefit from hearing it. So now let's talk about this issue of civil discourse and engaging in democratic participation. I don't know that there's a more important area for us to be focusing on. And the way we've been doing it through our lab and with many, many schools, including schools in different countries, is to add in. Because what do we want to do? We want to transform our kids. We want to have them go from complainers to activists, from bystanders to upstanders, from defeated to engaged. And so for that, they need a strategy. And we need those strategies to be embedded in existing subject areas, added in, but not on. And so let me show you an example of what we mean by this, because we really need kids. We really need them to be able to become greater participants in order to secure their own future. It's something we call students taking action together, STAT. And it's our turn to affirm our beliefs in equity, civility, and broad student participation. So as we help students understand that they can get back to talking with each other, even if they don't necessarily agree with each other, then we get to a better place of civic engagement. We also need our kids to learn how to think more deeply about the issues around them, right? I mean, so many complicated issues that we're facing in our societies today. And so if our kids do not engage deeply in those issues, we are not going to get better at resolving them. This is something we need to be doing for our own and our children's futures. So the instructional strategies that we're talking about fit in with our academic content and develop skills like perspective taking, respectful debate, and learning how to solve social issues. These are the 5 skills we have identified as being most crucial to the task of promoting greater civility and civic engagement and discourse: empathy, perspective taking, communication, social problem solving, and emotion regulation. Of course, these 5 skills connect to all other competencies, but focusing on this 5 is the best way to get us to where we want to go. And this isn't a news bulletin, right? John Dewey said this over 100 years ago. We have to help our kids live their democracy, not just learn about democracy in civics class or history. Dina Simmons, founder of Liberated Ed, feels that Educators need practical instructional strategies to help students converse and connect across difference and engage civically in their communities. Karen Van Osdale, the director of Castle Practice, talks about the imperative of embedding these strategies in academic instruction so that educators and students together can begin to create through dialogue authentic action plans, not only for our most pressing social issues, but for issues in the schools. So these are the 5 STAT strategies that we are working with. And I'm not going to focus, obviously, on all of them, but I want to focus on one of them: yes, no, maybe. In yes, no, maybe, very simply put, we ask kids to look at a statement. For example, students who bully other students should not be allowed to remain in their school. And then to say, do you agree? Yes. Do you disagree? No. Or are you not sure? Maybe. Kids then literally go to different sides of the room representing yes, no, maybe. They pair up in groups of 2 or 3. They discuss, why did you say yes? Why did you say no? Why did you say maybe? They then report out, this is why our little group said yes. This is why our little group said yes. This is why our little group said no and maybe. And then they sit down. In other words, this is peer opinion sharing, learning how to respectfully listen to your peers, learning that as sure as you are about the answer, other people had different answers. And as sure as you were about the reason you said yes or no or maybe, someone else had a different reason for saying yes or no or maybe. It didn't occur to you. And as you do these yes, no, maybes around different topics, including subject area topics like history, language arts, etc., that I'll talk about in a minute, kids begin to expand their thinking skills, their perspective taking skills, and their empathy. And they begin to feel like they have something to say and a way to say it. So across the curricula, these yes, no, maybe statements can be in various areas. And here are just some that have been very popular in the work that we've been doing in the United States. Statements about museums. Should museums have mandatory admission fees? Yes, no, or maybe. What is the intention of an artistic work that you're studying in the curriculum? We look at a statue, we look at a painting, we look at a dance, we look at a sculpture. What was the intention of the artistic work? What do you think the author meant? We posed was it yes, no, maybe? This was the intention. In language arts, think about asking kids, did the way the author executed the next step in the story seem right to you? Yes, no, or maybe? And then kids begin to empower themselves to think about, how would I have authored that next chapter? How would I have had the character respond in that moment in the story? In science, think about clean energy initiative, climate change, vaccines. The yes, no, maybe statements are not a statement of truth. They're just statements. They could be worded that vaccines in the pandemic were not a good idea, or they could be vaccines in the pandemic were essential and should have been mandatory. It doesn't matter what the direction is. It's that there's a statement for which the kids then have a yes, no, maybe option that they can converse. And think about things in your school. Mandates you have, wearing badges, using cell phones or not, uniforms, misuse of bathrooms, cheating. What are the kids' positions on this? Yes, no, or maybe, in a very short period of time, engages kids and builds a lot of skills. For follow-up information about this, the book that our lab has developed, Students Taking Action Together, 5 Teaching Techniques to Cultivate SEL Civic Engagement and a Healthy Democracy. It's a book that we feel is going to make a very, very, very big difference in many ways. Right. I want to talk about the visual and performing arts. So in the United States, there are standards for arts education, and they center around these 4 artistic processes: creating, performing, presenting, and producing, responding, and connecting. I'm sure in every country you've got standards for artistic processes and arts education. We also have social and emotional competencies. And you can see the CASEL 5, and then what we add in for SECD, a sense of positive purpose. What arts educators have come to understand is that they're teaching kids the artistic processes cannot be successful without also activating social and emotional and character competencies. Can you create without being a good problem solver? Can you respond to art without having a sense of analytic skill and also a sense of empathy? Can you perform without being able to manage your strong emotions? Of course, the answer is no. And so what we're finding, and what's so clear in the visual arts and performing arts world, is that the ability for kids to optimize their talent depends on their social, emotional, character competencies. So in New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, these two groups came together and created a set of lesson plans that completely integrate SEL into visual and performing arts. You can see them at selarts.org and at arts@sel.org. And it is the epitome of what I've been sharing in the sense that it is added in, not on. We're not necessarily teaching these skills in the arts class, but we are activating them so that they become a part of how kids understand the creative and various artistic processes. So if you take a look at these two pictures, they depict, the one on the left looking at it is a classic Norman Rockwell picture created during World War II about the 4 freedoms. This is freedom from want. The picture on the right was created by Hank Willis Thomas and Emily Schur in 2012 about a modern day version of freedom from want. Yes, no, maybe question for your students. There are no artistic differences between these two pictures. Yes, no, or maybe. Think about all the analytic skills we're developing in the kids by having them just look at these two pictures and think about the artistic differences and then learn from each other about things that they didn't see, looking at the same picture, but I didn't see that. I didn't attend to that. And why didn't I attend to that? And then the strategy, the STAT strategy of plan, which is a problem-solving strategy. The question that kids can answer is, how did these two different pieces of art get created? Go back and look at the history. How did Norman Rockwell do this? Why did he do this? Why did Hank Willis Thomas and Emily Schur do this? What was the purpose of the art? Even when kids don't appreciate the art, they appreciate understanding the purpose of the artists. Just like kids who don't get math sometimes get engaged in understanding the purpose of the mathematicians or the scientists or the authors. And then in the plan context, ask the kids to imagine a third picture, the picture that they create. How would you create your own now? And having kids work in groups to create their own contemporary version of this picture. I mean, this is just one example, but you can imagine other themes where you go from past to present to future, and the kids are contributing. So look at what we're doing with this strategy. We're working within the curriculum. We're not adding on. We're using SEL and SECD to add. Here's another example. This is a mural in a public library in Los Angeles. Ask kids to analyze what you see. What do you see here? And there are so many things for kids to see. But kids now are so busy scanning on screens that they're less discerning than they need to be in order to be successful in the rigors of the challenges of public life ahead. And so we want our kids to look at things like this and write down what they see, and then have other groups write down what they see, and then share and learn from each other. Well, I didn't see that. It's right there. It's right there. Why didn't I see that? I have to learn to look more carefully. I have to learn to look at other people more carefully. I have to learn situations more carefully. I have to look at websites and information more carefully. Because if I don't do that, I am going to not know what I need to know in order to be successful, effective, to care for my family, to care for my community. Here's another example, one of my favorites, from the lovely work, Peter and the Wolf, elementary school teacher in Metuchen, New Jersey, teaches the characters, the themes, etc. And then she asks yes, no, maybe questions to her students in elementary school. When the music for Peter plays, I feel sad and heavy. Yes, no, maybe. When I listen to the music for Peter's grandfather, I think about my own family. I think the best theme was for the wolf, the duck, whatever. I think the best instrument is the oboe, timpani, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's the kids having an opportunity to respond in yes, no, maybe. Thinking, expressing, respectfully listening, getting a different perspective. Well, I never thought about the theme of the wolf as being the best theme in this way. You know, that's what we're opening up. The great possibility of inspiration. Our kids' inspiration must precede remediation. We must engage them, ignite them, inspire them before we try to fix them. No one likes to think that there's something wrong with them. Everyone likes to think that they've got some potential. As we ignite the potential, we then create a reason to work on the things that might hold us back from reaching these wonderful goals and achieving our noble purpose. So there are a bunch of resources here that you can follow up with, that I hope you will, because we've, in our lab, it's not just about good ideas, it's about good ideas into practices. And in most cases, the way we do it is to capture what fantastic educators have done. And so you can see that in these three, about STAT, about morning classroom conversation, and about the issue of equity and culturally responsive education. The issue of social studies and SEL in particular, dealing with civility and society. If you want more information about that, a white paper exists. You can get it at the web link that's provided. And again, if you can't catch it right now, you'll be able to get it in the recording. And the same thing is true about arts and SEL. A white paper has written about this. So again, we don't have to sort of reinvent the wheel. We don't have to wonder, well, no, this is all solid stuff. Now it's a question of extending and expanding the practices to make them available to all of our students in all of our schools. The final area I want to talk about is the need for professional development. Your wisest investment is in staff expertise, not programs and materials. That it's the person who carries out the program, it's not the program. Peter Gager and I did extensive research a number of years ago where we basically found that no matter what program you have, no matter how strong the evidence base is for the program, if it's not implemented well, it's not going to work. So that's why the Academy for Social and Emotional Learning in Schools offers virtual professional learning certificates in school leadership and in instruction for social, emotional, and character development. And again, this is truly online, virtual, international. We've had people from many, many different countries, most recently Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Morocco, UK, of course. Many countries have participated in this. And the reason is because there is insufficient emphasis on SEL in our current school leadership and instructional certification programs. And so in a relatively short period of time, people can be quite caught up. And there's also a special certificate now for social emotional learning lab for tier 2 and for STAT, which enables you to become a part of a growing network of implementers around the US and the world, and the opportunity to get access to additional resources. You can learn more about that at our lab website. And when you become part of the Academy for Social Emotional Learning in schools and get a certificate, you then become involved in a virtual community of practice. And it starts with your classes and your practicum, because there is a virtual supervised practicum that engages you to be part of a community of learners who support and assist one another during the courses and beyond, so that we're all benefiting from one another's expertise. The issues are too important for us to wait around and reinvent the wheel. So by being connected to a community of practice through the Academy, you then have ongoing support even after you get your certification. Right, we've covered to speak with you and share some of what we've learned. We want to make sure that we're adding SEL in and not on in the foreseeable future as we're in crisis environments. We talked about 7 areas in which that process of adding in can take place. Through the climate, through building positive purpose, through morning classroom conversations, promoting student voice, building competencies in civil discourse through students taking action together, connecting SEL to visual and performing arts, and finally by building staff capacity. But above all, we have to remember that children are like flowers. They grow toward the light. So it's our job to provide them with as much light as possible, toward which they all will grow. Thank you very much. Here is my contact information, should you be interested in follow-up of any kind. And again, my deep appreciation, gratitude for the award and recognition, for the ongoing collegiality of ENSEC. And we are just moving forward. And so I say onward to the work ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Elias, for your inspiring talk. I think each of us have some insightful ideas, a lot of ideas to reflect on. Myself, I will be more aware about the way how to develop children in order to instill to them the positive goal and the common good, the action for the common good. What is the difference between united and untied? I think it's very important to see when and where we put the I. Thank you very much. If there are any comments or questions. Thank you very much for your participation and for being with us at this time of our ENSEC conference. Thank you.
My great pleasure. My pleasure.
Excuse me, is it still possible to ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Professor Elias. Really useful information. I'm very impressed. I would like to ask you a question. I'm in Northern Italy. I'm a PhD student, and I'm very interested in social emotional learning and competencies, and everything you said, I fully and beyond agree with. Have you ever encountered, culturally speaking, maybe in other countries or even within the US or within given states where there is resistance to sell, and how do you go about it? Because all of us here are believers, but it's very difficult in traditional places, schools, to even get minimally closed. There's just, I mean, I'm saying this from what I have experienced here as a researcher and as a parent in Northern Italy. And I find it very frustrating and sad because, as you said, there's no time to waste. I mean, why reinvent the wheel? There are so many resources out there.
Right. I think especially now, and there is pockets of resistance in the United States, but it's politically motivated. The vast majority of parents surveyed are very supportive of SEL. And here, let me give you a quick, if I may, a quick example. There was a meeting recently where someone was asked, well, how do you think about kids learning how to get along with each other? Oh, yes, yes, that's important. And how about kids not being violent to each other? Oh yeah, I definitely don't want kids to be violent to each other. And how about being caring? You know, when you're with a group, you want kids to be caring and not difficult with each other. Yeah. Well, are you in favor of all that? Yeah. Are you in favor of SEL? No. So we're dealing with a fundamental misunderstanding about SEL. And so, you know, sometimes terminology matters. Now, I will say this. There's a reason why the European network is the European Network for Social Emotional Competence. Who could be against your kid being socially and emotionally competent? So I can be against social emotional learning because I don't understand it. But do I want my kid to be socially and emotionally incompetent? I can't imagine that. So I think we have to then, that's why the whole idea of adding in and not on. The archetypal example I gave you about the performing arts is critical, because the arts folks came to understand that if I want better arts performance, I need to take SEL into account. So where's the argument? You know, where's the controversy? There's no controversy, because what you're saying is, I want to help you get better. I'm not telling you to adopt SEL. I'm not telling you to teach SEL. I'm going to work with you to show how SEL is going to make artistic work better. And the same thing in social studies, language arts, etc. So we have to go to the schools and basically say to the schools, what are you trying to accomplish? And here is how we can help you reach your goals. Again, our mantra has lately been SEL or SECD, better framed, makes your valued outcomes happen. Not my valued outcomes happen, your valued outcomes happen. So when you're resisting me, you're resisting your own well-being. But we don't typically put it that way. And it takes a little extra time to learn about the schools that you're working with, to see where their needs really are. And then sometimes, you know, I will tell you, as my family will attest, I am one of the least artistic people on the planet Earth. But I've immersed myself on SEL and the visual and performing arts, and it's taken a lot of work and a lot of time. But that's where the need was. That's where the opening was. So that's where I went. I didn't go to the place that's easiest for me. I went to the place where the need was the greatest and the opportunity was the greatest. So that's my message. We've got what we're offering here is enhancement, vitamin, catalyst. And most people want that. But that's how we have to offer it.
Thank you so much. So it's how I present it, basically.
Well, again, it's not for you. It's you for them. It's the common good.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you. There is another question here.
Thank you. It really follows up on Linda's question, I think. And I was really enjoyed your presentation, and I was touched by some of the STAT work and the images that you had of Black Lives Matter, particularly, and working with trainee teachers who are scared to touch on those areas that might be politically sensitive. And we have a government in England that have said that Black Lives Matter are a victim blaming organization who shouldn't be invited in to talk to school students. So how do we encourage teachers to be brave enough to engage in that sort of open discussion in classrooms? Because I do think it's really important, but I think they are scared.
Right. Well, I mean, obviously these things have to work on more than one track, right? Because the teachers need to have supportive administrators. It should not only be the teachers that have to be brave. Actually, no one should have to be brave. It should be routine. But one of the things that, one of the resources that I listed was a book with, actually it's a guide with Larry Leverett about SEL and culturally responsive education. And I feel that that is the route to take. Because again, culturally responsive education is about making whatever it is you're trying to teach better. It is not about educating about culture. It's about using culture to better educate. And so that's why it is not political inherently. And it tries to embrace the importance of understanding all cultures. And also, though, there's a bedrock here. We can't have a sense about any social issue without empathy and perspective taking. Kids have to be willing to go into history. They have to be willing to understand how people feel and have felt in the past, now. So this is where the SEL activation comes in as an important initial step. And so you know, it's a building process. So one of the other problems that and this is where I feel for educators so much, is that, you know, you have these kids in the 5th grade and you want to make them open human beings, right? You want to make sure they're anti-racist, let's just say. You can't do that in the 5th grade. It's going to happen in the 5th grade, the 6th grade, the 7th grade, the 8th grade. We're in a relay race. We got to pass the baton all the way through. So it's important for educators to put less pressure on themselves as individuals. What am I going to do with my kids? How am I going to open them up a little bit? How am I going to expand their appreciation of other cultures in a way that fits the curriculum, makes sense with what I'm doing? And then the larger issues of how we're going to pass the baton from grade level to grade level in the whole school, those are administrative and policy issues. Teachers cannot do this as subversives. But what they can do is be true to the kids they have in that year, in their class, with them, and open them up. And that little bit of opening up, that little bit of skill building, that little bit of enlightenment about empathy and compassion and perspective taking, that will take their kids a certain distance. And then hopefully someone else will have the baton, maybe in 8th grade, and take them further. But the big issues that you're talking about, these are policy issues, and they need to be confronted. We need to get our teachers' unions and our administrators. I mean, that's where the courage needs to be shown. It's not an individual teacher risking their job by trying to do some specific lessons. I mean, that's not gonna be earth-shaking for the kids, and it's not gonna create social change.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you again, Professor Elias. We are honored and really grateful for your presence at our ENSEC conference 2022. Thank you very much.
And I hope to see you in person in 2 years.
Let's hope.
Thank you.
Thank you again.